Well, good question. Right? So there's a couple of scenarios that could happen there. One, again, from an AppV environment, most likely, Word and Excel are in the same package. Right? So we have a similar situation where you do have an option to keep them separate. You could keep Word and Excel as separate settings, not tied to each other in any way. Right? And that's the default. Right? However, just like with AppV, that certain components need to integrate with each other and find each other. We both need to see in the same registry key. Well, these settings are private. So you might actually create Office as a, what we call an application group, which would be kind of the equivalent of an AppV package. And so in which case they would be tied together, and then Excel and Word would be together. So depending how you configured, the Office was just one example. But if there were two different applications, Acrobat and WinZip, and you had launched Acrobat before you left, well, WinZip would come up plain vanilla. We never block the application will always launch. It's just whether my settings are there or not.
Thank you. That was the important answer.
Okay. Other question, am I moving in and out of the side?
That's all right.
Other questions? Yes?
Who are your competitors?
So we kind of have, what I'd say is, do you want to answer that one?
Sure.
Yes, most.
Our biggest competitor by far is status quo. So, like I said, I mentioned roaming profiles. We replace roaming profile. So that is by far and away our largest competitor. On a smaller scale, I'd say if you look in the Citrix world, they have an OEM product as registry having. VMware product, they have a tool that speeds up roaming profile. To run, obviously, and if you're familiar with it, those technologies, you know what I'm talking about. And in the kind of independent vendor side, probably most well known is a company called RES. They're a Dutch company. You may not have heard of them. Most of their teams in Europe. But yeah, I'd say overall in the market, those are our top competitors. Now you'll talk to, I saw the latest up there, a lot of the Mocha 5, some of those up and coming broker types. They do a lot of layering technology, so they say they kind of have profile management built in. Their big win is more on the broker side than anything else. But it's kind of a built-in tool for them, so that helps.
I just wanted to add the tools that are built into Citrix and in Vue, so the RTO product, which hasn't really come to fruition yet, but even like UPM, those generally are specific to that environment, right? So UPM for Citrix works for XenApp, and then you can also get it to work for Zen Desktop, but you couldn't use that also in VMware. You couldn't use that on the desktop as well. So one of the things we benefit from is that cross-platform, that we work across all those. Yes.
Not quite sure of Windows, but this looks like it works very well in the enterprise environment. How far downsize company-wise could you go, or numbers of users before it doesn't pay for itself?
Yeah.
Roughly, I mean,
no.
It doesn't have a fit for small and medium businesses.
Yeah, depending on your definition. One thing, I would say this, we were at a conference, a Citrix conference, a while back, and the head of their product team for Zen Desktop said, if you have a user environment over 250 users, you need to use AppSense. That came out of his mouth. So that's a good benchmark. And not that 250 users is a magic number in any way, other than the fact that this applies to any size environment, depending on the complexity of how you're delivering applications. So for instance, if you're running a call center with 1,000 users, but they all have the same application, they have a mandatory profile, well, you don't really need us in that case. We handle complexity. If you have an environment with 500 users, of which you're locally installing some apps, you're using the Citrix streaming, maybe use VMware Thin App, maybe use AppV, then that's a pretty good candidate for what we're trying to do, associated with some mobile users. So depending, it's really take the number of variables and how you're delivering that desktop for those applications to those users, and that'll give you a good sense in terms of where our value prop is. So that's where it starts to make for itself.
Other questions or cutoff? I'm sorry, he just had one question. Yes.
All your rules, are they directly tied into group policy, or can you create your own rule sets? If there's something...
No. Yes and no. So all these actions that we have, please come back up, right, are actually native calls to Windows API calls. So again, things like scripting that you may have done, or things that might happen in group policy. I mentioned we run in parallel, but we also try to make the native call when possible. Right? So we think that's where we get a performance gain. But if you we don't really have a rule for you, you don't want to customize it, but there is a policy, and you still would like to take advantage of our parallel processing and the API calls, we do have, excuse me, where'd it go? I just not see. Oh, there we go. So we have group policy action, where you can apply an ADM or an ADMX. And so what we're doing here, and this is actually kind of neat, I think, is that what we do is we're pointing to where you normally store your ADM, ADMX files. In fact, you can move others in there. And then what we'll do is you just say, well, yep, let's find a setting in there. And so right now it's just reading in all the ADM, ADMX files. I did ADMX here, but it reads in all the files and all the settings and puts it into one. And now we also have a filter. So down at the bottom, I type in remove. Let's say I want to remove something, remove the computer, my computer icon or something. Well, when I type in remove, it automatically filters that list. So the idea is that if you know there's specific group policy settings and you want to do it through us, and again, some of the nice things about us is that we can do more fine-tuned targeting without a lot of hassle. You can have conditions based on this user, this computer, this IP address, and then apply the setting as opposed to trying to work out, filtering rules, WMI rules. We do that, I think, a lot more flexible. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be around for a little bit. You have questions?
Okay, we got evaluation forms that are being passed out. We're going to be looking for those to be turned in for the drawing prize later on. We're going to take a 5-minute break.